As promised, we're picking up right where we left off, and let's go ahead with AAA Authentication. And we got quite a few options here, so let's see. Let's go with login, because that's actually what we're going to do. We're going to set an authentication list for a login. And you can name the authentication list if you want. You can note there's a maximum of 31 characters, and by golly, if you go further than that, longer than that, it's going to be rejected. That's a lot of typing for 45 character named authentication list, so it's good that it's making us do that. We're going with a default list anyway. That's what we're going to create. So we're going to go with the default list. And now you actually start defining, which methods you want to use. And let's look at a couple of these because a couple will look familiar. Going from top to bottom, cache, use cached group. We've never hit that one actually in any of my videos. We're not going to do it here either. But enable password, we're certainly familiar with that. Use a server group. We could use K5. We could use K5 Telnet, a line password, a local username password. Notice that it gives us an option to use the local username authentication, which is our username password database, or a case-sensitive version of the same database. There's an option for no authentication. That's interesting. And an option to enable the login list to provide password aging support. So we're not going to go with that. But the problem here is, do you see anything with TACACS in it or radius? That's because you have to go with the word group here if you're going to use either one of those. And here we've got the option. You can create a server group name. We're not going to do that here, but you could create a group of TACACS servers, group of radius servers. We're just going to go with group radius. We'll go with group TACACS plus here first, actually. So that's going to call up our TACACS server, which we define only one. And here's a couple of interesting things here. We've got the option to put more options. We can add authentication options to this particular list. And what in the world is going on with that none option? We're going to all this trouble and we're putting no authentication in. I don't know about that, but actually, in rare circumstances, there's a reason you might want to run that. But here's why that TACACS choice was legal and fine on its own, but why we can list more authentication choices. You can actually name up to 4 authentication methods, and they will be used in the order listed from left to right. And we're going to talk about what I mean exactly by be used in just a moment. Now, what I did on the line you see on the board here, where it has the $ because my command's so long, I put login, default, group TACACS, line, local, enable. And there are, I hit my limit of 4. Then I tried to list a 5th method or even look at them with iOS help like you see here on the board. And iOS help wouldn't even show me the other options. I couldn't even put none at that point because you're limited to 4. And again, what this statement does, it lists my TACACS server as the first method, a line password second, the local database third, and then finally the enable password. iOS wouldn't show me anything else because my statement was already at the legal limit. So it's going to cut you off before you even get started. By the way, very quick refresher here. I'm going to get rid of that about the username password command. If you want to create your own little, and we'll just go with mine. And really, that's it. That is a local username database. There are other options in the center of it you're probably familiar with, including assigning someone privilege level 15. You learned that in your NA studies. But just a quick reminder of what we're talking about with a local database, because the word database really freaks some people out. I know you're not one of these people, but one of those other people may be listening, and we have to take that into account just between you and me. So we've got the username password database set up. That's no issue at all. And we've also seen how we have a limit of 4 authentication methods in our authentication line. Now, I want to talk about really the most important rule of this section. And the one I have on the board here, let's say that I ended it right there with group TACACS plus, but then I want to add some others. So I'm making group TACACS first. Misspoke a little bit. I'm making group TACACS plus first, and then I want to follow it with others. Well, under what circumstances exactly are those other methods going to be used? Because the order does matter. The router or the switch is going to go from left to right with that command. So here really is the most important rule of the entire section. In this line, we know that TACX plus in the line we just looked at will be the first authentication method used. Now, if the TACX plus authentication attempt times out or an error is encountered returned by that server, the next method we choose in the line will be used. So here's the deal, the switch gets the request, hey, I'm Dave. And the switch looks to the TACX server and says, do you have an entry for Dave? And we don't hear anything back. Well, in that case, the next method that we have in that AAA authentication statement list is going to be used. Now, if TACX Plus refuses the authentication attempt, the second method is not used. And then the third method's not used. And the fourth method isn't used because that's the end of the authentication try right then and there. It's all over. So again, I know I'm hitting you over the head with this a little bit, but it's a fine line that we have to walk here. If the authentication attempt times out or an error is encountered, then the next method you put in that line will be used. If that first one refuses that user, then we don't go to the second method. It's all over right then and there. Now, what the heck about that none option? We're taking time, we're studying, we're practicing, and all of a sudden it's like, oh yeah, we have this option for no authentication. Well, I thought, I want to put no authentication. In some cases, it actually does come in handy. It's really always a good idea to let me put that up there and stop shaking it. Thank you. It is always a good idea to list at least one authentication method that does not require an external device. Because what happens occasionally with connections to external devices, they go down, or the external device goes down. The more hardware you have, the bigger the chance that something's going to go wrong somewhere. Well, what you don't want is a situation where one external device isn't available and then we can't authenticate anybody. We can't have that. That's like a single point of failure. We don't want that. Now, some admins like to use none at the end of the authentication method list. So no authentication is necessary if the external servers are down. If the first choices are unavailable, when you hit none, it's like, hey, come on in. The enable password is also a good choice for that. I like to do that one just so we've still got a little protection there. But always leave yourself a backdoor to get in. Always stay logged in while you test your authentication setup with a separate connection. Okay? I've been there. You just write the thing. It's like, okay, let's test that. And you log in. Hey, it doesn't work. Now what? You're locked out. That's what now. So again, always leave yourself some kind of backdoor to get in with AA authentication, and always stay logged in while you test your setup, your authentication, with a separate connection, because you never want to log out and then realize you can't log back in. It is a sickening feeling. By the way, I'm sure at least one of you was thinking, hey, wait a minute, I'll put none as the first option and then see what I can put other stuff behind that. Well, of course, that would always be none anyway. But once you choose none as an option, you can't list any other options. And I believe I got that on the board. I'll just go ahead and show that to you here. AAA authentication login default none. So I put none as my first list, or the first authentication method in the list, and then iOS help would not even show me a second one. It was all over. And I did cut off a line there. Let me show you that. Authentication login, default, none. And there you go. I cut the CR out there in the book to show you that there were no other options. Once you put none, you can't put anything else in. And I'll correct that in our document. Now, what you need to do, finally, I've got an authentication method list here that will go to the TACX server first, then our Radius server, and then would use the local username password database if those servers are unavailable or return errors. And that long-winded command, AAA authentication, login, default, group TACX, group Radius, and then local. It's really simple. The longer commands tend to intimidate at first. I understand that. But this one, just follow along with it from left to right. It's like we're going to try this method, then this method, and then this method. We're going to do another lab with that in a moment. I want to test. You remember that outlandish statement I made in the previous video, I believe it was. We need to prove that. But firstly, a word to the wise, which I know defines all you Bulldogs listening to this. Don't get cute. Don't get cute first with passwords. You know, there's a cliche, you know, never do anything that you don't want to see on the front page of the newspaper, or never do anything that you don't want your mom reading about, something like that. Well, you never set a password that you don't want to say out loud at a meeting, particularly a meeting with high-ranking, very sensitive human beings. It didn't happen to me, but I was there to see it, and it was just ridiculous. So never assume that you are the only person who's ever going to know what a certain password is. Doesn't work out. Now, another time not to get cute is when you're naming an AAA list, particularly authentication. For some reason, admins like to use AAA for the name of the list, you know, and it results in a command like this, you know, or we've got AAA authentication login password group TACX plus local. Don't do that. Don't call your list login or TACX plus or radius or group, because then you end up with a list that or a command that looks like AAA authentication login TACX plus group TACX plus local. And someone's going to look at that and go, huh? Well, the name comes right after login. You and I know that, but don't use another word that's already appearing in the command. You know, just don't get cute with it. When you give something a name on a router or a switch, make the name intuitive, you know, and don't use a word already in the command. And don't use password. I know I put password there instead of AA, but don't use password either. It's just not good. Authorization is coming up, but first what we're going to do is a AAA lab with authentication, and we will start that at the beginning of the very next video. See you there.